Почитувани читатели на порталот Чаршија Таймс и Горан Димитриевски подкаст, ми представува чест и задоволство да ви го најавам мојот нов гостин, професор Сем Вакнин. Професоре, ви благодарам за можноста да поразговараме.
Thank you. Call me Sam. It's shorter.
Ве бараше публиката таму во коментари, пишува поканете го професорот. Вие сте веројатно сигурно еден од можеби најцитираните кога е во прашање Блискиот исток во Македонија, аналитичари, а ние веќе имавме договорено средба, така да баш ми е мило и драго.
Thank you for having me.
Би сакал да ве прашам нешто лично, вака едно прашање, а тоа е како фактот дека сте роден во Израел и сте служел во израелската армија го обликува вашиот светоглед и психолошки и политички.
I am first and foremost a humanist. Only in the second place, I'm a Jew, and in the third place, I'm an Israeli. So when there is a conflict between these three, I don't have a conflict. I don't have an internal conflict. I'm first and foremost a humanist. And if Israelis behave in an inhuman way, then I condemn them. And if Israelis believe in a non-Jewish way, I condemn them as well, because I'm first and foremost a humanist and a Jew.
Вашето потекло исто така мислам дека е дел од вашите родители се од Турција, дел се од Мароко.
So,
Дали чувствувате дека тоа ваше етничко и семејно потекло влијаело врз овие ваши идентитетски теми, разбирање на Блискиот исток, на другиот, различниот?
it allows me a better understanding of the mentality of some of the players involved. In Israel, about half the population came from Europe, especially Eastern Europe. Maybe now it's more than half because of the Russian immigration from Russia. So about 60% came from Europe, Eastern Europe, mainly, a very small percentage from Western Europe. And about half the population, or 40% of the population, came from Arab countries, or from countries such as Turkey and the Balkans. So there is a distinction between Ashkenazi and Sephardi, whereas the Sephardi are much closer in mentality, in outlook, in psychology, in cultural memory, in culture, in social mores and conventions, in many ways, are much closer to the indigenous people of the Middle East. The Israelis who came from Europe, and by now they are fourth generation, fifth generation, they were born in Israel, yes? But these Israelis who came from Europe still have serious difficulties to understand the mentality of most of the nations of the Middle East. And I think that's one core issue in the conflict. I think it was a culture war. To start with, it was a culture war. And it was an extension of similar culture wars, for example, between the French and the Algerians, and between the British and the Indians, and there were similar culture wars going on all over the world in the 19th century. Zionism and the State of Israel are nothing special when you take it in the context of the 19th century. So,
А кога сме кај вас, исто така сакам да ве прашам, вие живеете во Македонија. Каква е состојбата според вас на, да речеме, евреите во Македонија, на Балканот, нели тие се наследници на некој начин од Отоманската империја, кои тука живееле, биле најбројни во Солун и Битола, ако не се лажам, или не знам точно, поправете ме. Каква е денес состојбата на евреите во Македонија, зборувам, од време Отоманската империја до денес? Има ли, еве сега една тема, например, во светот на Запад, тој антисемитизам, нели, раст на антисемитизам визави израелско-палестинскиот конфликт и пост 7 октомври. Дали вие во Македонија се чувствувате добро? Дали сметате дека во Македонија има антисемитизам или?
There's no more anti-Semitism in Macedonia or in the Balkans than there is anywhere else. Anti-Semitism is a perception of the Jews, which is historical and religious and so on. This perception is sometimes negative. the Jews are stingy, they love money, they're unreliable, they're untrustworthy, and so on. Sometimes it's a negative perception. And sometimes the anti-Semitic perception is actually positive. So if you say, for example, that the Jews control the world, or the Jews are the most powerful and the most clever in the world, that's also anti-Semitism. Because when you are perceiving the other, when you are perceiving another ethnic group in a wrong way, the wrong way could be negative, the wrong way could be positive, at that point, this is xenophobia. At that point, there is underlying fear, underlying hatred, underlying rejection, and so on. And there's nothing special in Macedonia. I would say that in Macedonia, the anti-Semitism is more positive, of the positive type. Like you control the world, you own the media, you control the United States, you are the strongest in the world, you are the richest, you own all the money in the world, you own the banking in the world, and so on. So
ова ве прашувам заради тоа што пред неколку години можеби ја следевте веста кога Лев Тахор дојде во Македонија, една ултраортодоксна еврејска заедница, и беа на некој начин на нож пречекани. Јас, таксистот кој нив ги водеше покрај некои еврејски светилишта во Македонија, лично го познавам, да речам, тој ми е пријател, нивниот таксист на Лев Тахор, и знам колку беше проблем да се прифатат во некој хотел, нели медиумите зборуваа, се издигна на едно прашање каде мислам дека дури безбедносните служби мораат да дадат соопштение дека се работи за група која не е екстремна, која нема да предизвика никакви безбедносни импликации, али тоа прашање за Лев Тахор многу се издигна. И тука кај нас малце мене искрено ме изненади. Јас не очекував дека до тој степен ќе биде, и баш преку овој пријател разговарав со нив, дури тие беа изненадени. Го знаеме целиот случај со Лев Тахор, али беше некое чувство на голем страв, значи према таа еврејска заедница, и затоа
I've been outside Macedonia until recently. I actually returned to Macedonia last week. I lived in other countries. I lived in Russia, Hungary, France, the United Kingdom, and so on. And I returned to Macedonia last week. So I haven't been here many years. I don't know exactly what the situation is here, but throughout the world, there is a wave of anti-Semitism. As I said, some of it is negative, some of it is positive. Anti-Semitism shapeshifts, all the time changes shapes, all the time changes narratives, all the time changes disguises. So right now, the dominant form of anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. And you should make a distinction between anti-Zionism, which is not legitimate, and anti-Israelism, which may be legitimate. And Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people have a right to have their own country. If you oppose Zionism, you are an anti-Semite, because every ethnic group in the world, Macedonians included, have a right to have their own country, period. If you disagree with it, if you say the Jews are the only exception and they don't have a right to have their own country, then you're anti-Semitic. That is not the same as criticizing the policies and the actions of the Israeli state, which is legitimate, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. We criticize many countries. We criticize the United States in the Iraq war. We criticize Russia in the Ukraine war. We criticize Israel in the Gaza war. That's completely okay. But if you go one step further and you say Zionism is wrong, if you're anti-Zionist, then you are simply anti-Semitic, wearing a new clothes, you know?
Дали тука темата антиционизам, антисемитизам, таа е една жестока тема во САД последнава година и направи големи поделби левица, десница. Дали може би прашањето за Божи избран народ е прашање кое, како вие го гледате, ајде вака, би ве прашал, еврејскиот народ како Божи избран народ, дали е тоа може би нешто што во овие прашања антиционизам, антисемитизам предизвикува поголема, да речам, проблем за самиот еврејски народ и разбирање на ова прашање?
So, first of all, the differences between the left and the right in the United States, as far as anti-Semitism, the differences are disappearing. The right is becoming anti-Semitic, as much anti-Semitic as the left. So you have people like Tucker Carlson and Fuentes and others, and they are highly anti-Semitic. So these differences are disappearing. And I think with the election of Mamdani in New York and so on, we are beginning to get signals that Israel has lost its influence in the United States and that anti-Semitism is becoming global in the United States. Everyone is going to be anti-Semitic, left, right, and center. And anti-Semitic leaders are being elected, like Mamdani. Mamdani claims he's not anti-Semitic. Of course he's anti-Semitic. He is anti-Zionist. So this is point number one. Point number two, we should distinguish two types of anti-Semitism because we tend to put all anti-Semitism in the same basket. That's historically untrue. There is religious cultural anti-Semitism, and that is the anti-Semitism that started in the first century with the Gospels, because in the Gospels it says that the Jews killed Jesus Christ. So they are the killers of Christ. And there was religious anti-Semitism, which later on transformed in the 19th century mainly, transformed into cultural anti-Semitism and financial anti-Semitism. So this is one type of anti-Semitism. And then there is another type of anti-Semitism, and that is the anti-Semitism that is founded on the belief that the Jews have too much influence in the world. And that started with the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a falsificat. It's a falsified, forged document created by the Cheka, by the predecessor of the KGB. And starting with this document, there was a widespread belief that the Jews are overpowerful, too influential, in control of too many things, and so on and so forth. And that is the modern incarnation of anti-Semitism. And now you have, for example, the far right in the United States, and they are saying that the Jews control the United States. They control the Congress, they control. And now you have, for example, affairs like Jeffrey Epstein affair, where people are saying that Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Mossad and he was blackmailing people, important people all over the world. These are all transformations of the anti-Semitic trope. The Jews are too powerful. Before that, the story was the Jews don't share our religion, don't share our culture. The Jews are destroying our society. They are polluting, they're contaminating our cultural and social sphere. And so this was the previous version of anti-Semitism. The previous version mostly died after the Holocaust. Today, you would find very few people who would say that the Jews are religious offenders or cultural contaminators or whatever. But the new version is very powerful and very dominant. And of course, the state of Israel is a powerful state, is a rich state, an influential state. And that tends to support the anti-Semitic myth of control of the Jews are controlling the world, you know.
А дали за сегашниот раст, како што рековте, за антисемитизмот на Запад, дали сметате дека израелската влада, предводена од Бенјамин Нетањаху, има свој удел во тој раст на антисемитизам денес? Затоа што многу евреи гледаме дека се против она што Израел денес го прави во Газа, и дали сметате дека Израел денес во Газа спроведува геноцид?
Israel has definitely committed and probably is still committing war crimes in Gaza. There is very little question about this. And of course, war crimes should be punished by Israeli authorities or by global authorities, by international authorities, multilateral. However, there is a very important distinction between war crimes and genocide. Genocide is the deliberate, premeditated, planned attempt to destroy an ethnic or national group in whole or in part. So you say, I'm going to, for example, kill all the Jews. And if I cannot kill all the Jews, I will kill some of the Jews. So this would be genocide. But if you have a war, and the war takes place in a territory, and consequently you have tens of thousands of victims of one ethnicity, that would not qualify as genocide. For example, Russia is not committing genocide in Ukraine, no doubt about this. Although everyone who is dying in Ukraine is Ukrainian. So the fact that you have many people dying of the same ethnic group, that doesn't make it genocide. If there is no plan and intention to kill people of the ethnic group because they belong to the ethnic group and as a way to eliminate the ethnic group, ethnic cleansing, yes. So Srebrenica was a genocidal act because the Serbian soldiers collected men and collected boys, adolescents of a certain teenagers of a certain age, and just because they were Muslims, Bosniaks, they killed them. That would be a genocidal act because the main motivation was to kill them because of their ethnicity. The motivation of Israel in Gaza is to destroy the Hamas, and they don't care how many civilians die. And that is the war crime. The war crime is that Israel doesn't care how many civilians die, and they don't take sufficient steps, sufficient precautions to protect civilians, to prevent civilian deaths. But the aim of Israel is not to kill Palestinians, it's to destroy the Hamas. It's just that Israel is saying, if we destroy the Hamas and 100,000 civilians die, who cares? We don't care. To not care is a war crime. And this is the way I see it.
А изјавите на Бенгвир и Смотрич за етничко чистење, за преселба на палестинците, дури тоа на некој начин беше одобрено и од администрацијата на Доналд Трамп во еден период. Мислам дека во тој период кога американците дадоа на некој начин во наводници зелено светло на Израел, дека тука Израел ја премина таа граница на војување, на борба против Хамас, и дека тука буквално се изгладнуваше народот и сите тие работи, дека тука светот, па дури и Пирс Морген, или кој беше за жесток британецот, британскиот новинар Пирс Морген, кој беше, наречам, жесток бранител на Израел, постоењето на самоодбрана и така натаму, дури и тој го смени тој наратив. Мислам дека во март месец беше оваа година тој наратив дека ова веќе не е самоодбрана, не е војна, дека ова веќе премина во етничко чистење, иако тој не го користи изразот се уште геноцид, меѓутоа меѓународниот, нели, суд ООН и сите други зборуваат за геноцид.
Ethnic cleansing is not genocide. These are two completely different things. Ethnic cleansing is a war crime, definitely. But it's not genocide. The intention of Israel, or not Israel, but the intention of some crazy Israelis, some extreme far-right fringe Israelis, to expel the Palestinians from their land in Gaza or the West Bank, not only Gaza. These actions are definitely 100% war crimes. There's no question, beginning of a question about this.
И мислите дека ќе одговара некој за овие воени злосторства? Зошто Западот за Русија, например, кога е Русија во прашање, гледаме ставија секој вид на санкции, блокади, така натаму, не тврда дека Русија врши геноцид, воени злосторства, инвазија, меѓутоа кога е Израел во прашање, Западот тоа не го прави. Според вас, зошто?
That's because the Palestinians are equally violent. Both sides deserve each other. The Palestinians committed an equal number of war crimes, if not more. They are not innocent. The Palestinians are not innocent. That's the reason. Had the Palestinians been like the Ukrainians didn't do anything to Russia. They didn't kill a single Russian. They didn't invade Russia. They didn't kill civilians in Russia. They didn't bomb Russia. They didn't commit terrorist acts in Russia. And yet Russia invaded Ukraine. That's not okay. The Palestinians did all these things in Israel and to Israelis, in Israel and outside Israel. They're not angels. The Israelis are not angels, definitely, but the Palestinians are not angels as well. None of this justifies war crimes. Even if you are not an angel, the other party has no right to commit war crimes. But to describe the situation as all good and all bad, That is historically inaccurate and wrong. Both parties misbehaved. Both parties committed war crimes. Both parties behaved in a way which triggered additional violence and created cycles of violence, time and again. Both parties, not only the Israelis.
Вие имате работено за Middle East Times, тоа беше портал, како новинар, како аналитичар. Денес се уште Израел нема дозволено на странски новинари да влезат во Газа, исто така пак зборувам Пирс Морген, еден од тие кои го бараат тоа, велат сме го покривале Авганистан, Ирак и така натаму, доколку ние не сме во право, западните медиуми сме пристрасни по прашање на Израел, дозволете ни да влезиме. Дали сметате дека Израел треба да им забрани на странските новинари или треба да ги пушти на нивна одговорност? Па да видиме.
Of course they should allow journalists into Gaza. No question about it. They're not allowing journalists into Gaza because they're committing war crimes. So this is a way to prevent coverage of the war crimes. And not allowing journalists is a major sign that something really bad is happening there. And there's no justification whatsoever for not allowing journalists into a specific territory. In the history of humanity, we have had similar situations where journalists were not allowed into specific territories or in specific situations, and then it was discovered that horrible things were happening there. One example is the Holocaust, where Germany did not allow journalists to visit the camps and to talk to prisoners and to inmates. And throughout the history of the Holocaust, Germany allowed a single visit of the International Red Cross, only once, to the camps. I'm talking about the extermination camps and the concentration camps. Whenever journalists are not allowed into a specific location, you know that horrible things are happening there. No doubt.
Вие во едно интервју велите дека уште на почетокот, кратко после 7 октомври, дека Израел доколку влезе во Газа, ќе има проблем, дека и доколку ја освојат, многу ќе биде тешко таа борба со Хамас, и гледаме дека до денес Хамас не е поразен. Значи се уште тоа ваше предвидување и таа анализа се потврди како точна. Каде Израел денес? Што се случува денес моментално во Газа? Тие преговори Турција, САД, во Египет, како вие гледате понатаму дека ќе се одвива ситуацијата?
There is a big difference between tactical victories and a strategic victory. Israel succeeded tactically. It damaged Hamas considerably. Not only leaders, it definitely damaged the military formations of Hamas, the weapons production facilities. It destroyed most of the weapons of Hamas. It isolated Hamas from the side of Egypt and from the side of Israel. The damage to Hamas is enormous. Similarly, Israel had victories against Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is in very bad shape. But these are tactical victories. Strategically, Hamas won the war, not Israel. Israel is isolated. Israel is hated. Israel is bankrupt, economically bankrupt. Israel is divided inside, internal divisions. Israel is on the verge of civil war. Israel is in catastrophic shape. So yeah, tactically, they won the war. But strategically, I think Israel will pay a horrible price for what they've done.
Дали во таа тактичка војна Израел очекуваше, например, наместо Хамас сега ги доби, покрева што викате целото јавно мнение насочено против Израел, дури една моќна држава како Турција за непријател? Често се зборува дека Турција веќе навлезе во Сирија, дека целта е, нели, како викат израелските политичари или новинари, дека Турција сака да влезе во Ерусалим, дека ние, борејќи се со Хамас, добивме уште посилен непријател, а тоа е Турција, не само Иран. Сега како ќе се објасни ова на израелското јавно мнение, дека сега и Турција е крива, нели? То сега војуваме во Либан, во Јемен, против Иран. Сега имаме една НАТО членка која е сериозен воен конкурент на Израел. Како тоа да се објасни сега Израел понатаму кога е во прашање и Турција? Некаква конфронтација со Турција.
Israelis have a siege mentality. They believe that the whole world hates them. They distrust the whole world, especially Muslims. So the fact that Turkey became an enemy is just a confirmation of the Israeli narrative that the whole world is against them. In Hebrew, it's Aolam kulo negdenu. The whole world is against us. And so the siege mentality is unchanged. And today it's Turkey, tomorrow it's Indonesia, the next day it's Philippines. It doesn't matter much. Muslims are Muslims, and they're going to be against us, and they're going to kill us, and they want us dead, and they want to throw us to the sea, and they want to reconquer Palestine and make it theirs, and so on and so forth. So it's not a big surprise there as far as the Israeli mentality. On the very contrary, when there are such powerful enemies outside, the Israelis are more cohesive. There's greater unity, let's say. But Turkey now, since you mentioned Turkey is making a very interesting pivot, because Turkey agreed to join the stabilization force in Gaza. It agreed to become a part of the international stabilization force. And so Turkey, there will be a Turkish presence in Gaza on Israel's border. And I don't know how Israel is going to cope with that, because Turkey was very pro-Hamas throughout the conflict, very anti-Israeli, and especially anti-Netanyahu. And I am not quite sure how Israel is going to cope with the fact that there will be thousands of Turkish soldiers across the border in Gaza. Additionally, the members of the International Stabilization Force are mostly Muslim countries. We are talking about Egypt, we are talking about Turkey, and so on. They will never disarm Hamas. They will never act against Hamas. No question in my mind. They will never round up Hamas. They will never arrest Hamas members. They will never take away their weapons. They will never isolate them. This is an Israeli fantasy. This is Israeli hallucination. Hamas is in Gaza. Hamas will remain in Gaza, and Hamas will acquire arms and rearm itself. Hamas will be stronger than ever, actually, and there is no way to prevent this. No way to prevent it. Not that Hamas are good people. They are not good people. They are not good people even with the Palestinians. But these are the facts. The Palestinian Authority is a joke. It's dysfunctional, it's corrupt, it's dying. Definitely it cannot rule Gaza because it doesn't even rule the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority rules a few minor cities in the West Bank. All the rest is Israeli control. So there's no way the Palestinian Authority will suddenly reassert control over Gaza. Gaza belongs to Hamas, period. Everyone accepts this except Israel. And that is a serious strategic mistake of Israel. Rather than try to reach some accommodation with Hamas, the way United States is doing now, is United States is talking to Hamas directly. Rather than do this, Israel keeps pretending that Hamas is dead. But it's not dead. And if Israel, of course, will again isolate Gaza, put a siege and so on, it will find itself in conflict with the United States and with Turkey and with Egypt, not only with Hamas. Now, ironically, Hamas has found new allies. Israel does not understand that it lost its power in the United States, that it is truly completely isolated. And if it will not obey the United States, if tomorrow Netanyahu disagrees with Donald Trump, Israel is doomed. Israel is much weaker now than 2 years ago. That's what people, I think, don't understand. They think Israel is much stronger. It's much weaker because it failed strategically. It failed to destroy Hamas. It lost all its allies. The European Union are not friends of Israel anymore. They recognize the Palestinian state and so on. And so it's not going well for Israel.
Сега оно што Израел веројатно ќе се обиде да го направи, или да го замрзне овој конфликт, или да виде да ги репреговара или реотвори повторно аврамските договори. Нели Джерад Кушнер беше кај Нетањаху, тој е еден од тие кои уште во првата Трампова администрација ги започна тие аврамски договори, таму беа Мароко, Емирати, мислам и уште неколку Бахрейн, да, неколку залевски земји. Има обид да се вклучи Саудиска Арабија и Сирија, меѓутоа Саудиска Арабија дава едни услови кои се признавање на палестинска држава и сите тие работи. Дали Израел ги закопа овие аврамски договори или мислите дека сега е последната шанса со нив да направи нешто па да го замрзне тој конфликт, па да се обиде повторно на јавна сцена тој имидж кој некогаш го имал, зборувам за западниот свет, повторно да го поврати како некоја блискоисточна демократија, отколку ова што денес гледаме дека изолирана земја, како што спомнавте и така натаму. Значи за аврамските договори.
The United States will try to introduce additional countries to the Abraham Accords, and I believe the first one will be Saudi Arabia, and soon, even without Palestinian state, even without commitment of Israel to Palestinian state. I believe very soon Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accord. And the idea is this: if Israel doesn't feel isolated, if Israel doesn't feel that everyone is an enemy, if Israel doesn't believe that the Arab countries are going to attack soon, and so on and so forth, maybe Israel will allow the Palestinians to have some kind of self-determination. That's the belief. That's the story. The story is Israel is paranoid. Israel is afraid, especially after October 7. But if Syria becomes a friend of Israel, if Saudi Arabia becomes a friend of Israel, if Lebanon is no longer a threat, if Israel feels less isolated, more secure, more at peace, maybe they will relax and they will give something to the Palestinians. That is a completely mistaken strategy, because Israel is not giving anything to the Israel is not preventing the Palestinians from having a state only because of security reasons. Israel is not giving the Palestinians a state because Israel regards these territories as Israeli territories. That's the reason. They regard the West Bank as an Israeli territory, Judea and Samaria. So they're not going to give it to the Palestinians, even if they have Abraham Accords with the entire United Nations. They're not going to give it to the Palestinians. It's too late for this. In the year 2000, Israel suggested to the Palestinians to receive 96.7% of the territory of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Arafat rejected it, and that was the last time there was any meaningful discussion of a Palestinian state. Palestinian state is a pipe dream, will never ever happen, period. Even if tomorrow the left becomes the government in Israel, there will not be a Palestinian state. It's too late for this. There are 800,000 people in the West Bank, 800,000 settlers in the West Bank. Israel controls directly 42% of the West Bank territory and another 40% indirectly. There's no way to establish a state there. So the only solution is a one-state solution. And for a one-state solution to happen, Israel needs to get rid of as many Palestinians as it can. Because a two-state solution can never happen, and because in a one-state solution, Palestinians will be the majority, so they need to get rid of Palestinians. They need to throw away 2-3 million Palestinians, and then they will make a one-state solution with all the Palestinians, and everyone will be happy. I think this is the Israeli stratagem. You asked me before about the chosen people. In Judaism, the belief is that the Jews have been chosen to spread the word of God among other nations. Not that they are chosen because they're special, or they're superior, or they're unique, or they deserve special treatment. No, that's not the meaning of the chosen people. Chosen people means you have a job. You got a job from God. You're employed by God. You're an employee. An employee with very bad conditions. No pension fund, no health care. Your job is to spread the word of God. Now, I'm telling you this because there is a major distinction between religious Jews and secular Jews. The state of Israel has been established by secular Jews who were essentially anti-religious. And the truly religious Jews, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, they regard the state of Israel as a violation against God, a blasphemy, a sacrilege. So the ultra-Orthodox Jews, they want to destroy the state of Israel because they think the state of Israel is a horrible thing. It's an offense against God. Consequently, the truly religious, which are about 15% of the population, not a small number, the truly religious do not accept the authority of the state, refuse to serve in the army, many of them refuse to pay taxes, and so on. They regard the state of Israel as an abomination, an extension of the West, if you wish, but definitely not divine. The religious Jews believe that a Messiah will come, and it is the Messiah who will establish the third temple, and only the Messiah has the authority to establish the third temple. If you as a Jew say that you want to establish the third temple, you should be stoned to death according to Jewish codex, to Jewish law. So all the people in Israel who say that Al-Aqsa should be Jewish, Temple Mount should be Jewish, and the temple should be established, they are rejected by both the secular Jews and they are rejected by the religious Jews. They are ultra-nationalists. They have nothing to do with Judaism and nothing to do with the state of Israel. They're crazy people, and they're very tiny number, very small number. It's not serious. Israel has always recognized the authority of Islam over Al-Aqsa. That's why Al-Aqsa is not managed by Israel. It is managed by the Waqf, the authority, the Muslim authority. It has never been managed by Israel. Even when Israel, even right now, where is the ultra-right, far-right government and so on, no one has ever spoken about taking Al-Aqsa back or anything. According to...
Значи не би посегнале по такво нешто, да се промени статусот според вас?
Never. First of all, according to religious law, Jews are not allowed to step on the mountain. They are not allowed to go there physically. That's a Jewish law, the law of Judaism. So no Jew who respects the Jewish law ever climbs this mountain. It's forbidden. Second thing, even in 2000, Israel offered to the Palestinians to take back East Jerusalem with Al-Aqsa. It is the Palestinians who rejected it. In any future settlement, East Jerusalem is going to be under the control of the Palestinians. Al-Aqsa probably is going to be under the control of the Waqf with some kind of co-government, some kind of joint government, or over Jerusalem in its totality, so Israelis and Palestinians together, as it used to be until 1948. Until 1948, Palestinians and Israelis, Jews, were in control of Jerusalem jointly. And Al-Aqsa was exterritorial, and Jews and Palestinians and anyone could actually... Israelis have a big complaint, and that is why Israelis are very skeptical of the two-state solution. They say, until 1967, the West Bank and Gaza were controlled by Arab states. Jordan, Transjordan, controlled the West Bank. Why didn't they give a state to the Palestinians? Egypt controlled Gaza. Why didn't Egypt give Gaza to the Palestinians? So there is a big skepticism in Israel that this demand for a Palestinian state suddenly happened after 1967. Before 1967, when Arab countries were in control of these territories, the Palestinians never asked for a state. Israelis, most Israelis, not me, but most Israelis believe that the Palestinians are not indigenous people, but they are immigrants, that they came to Palestine as immigrants. The truth is, of course, that what we call today the Palestinians came to the area of Palestine with the Arab conquest in the 7th century. So in the 7th century, if you go back to the 7th century, the Palestinians were colonialists. They colonized Palestine with the Arab conquest. But ever since the 7th century, the Palestinians had a continuous presence in Israel. In 1880, the number of Palestinians in the territory that is today the State of Israel was 400,000 people, and the number of Jews was 21,000 people. That's 1880. So definitely, until 1880, the vast majority of population were Palestinian, not Jews, not Israelis. In 1882, that was the start of the immigration from Poland, from Russia, of Jews to Israel, and gradually the demographic balance shifted. But in 1948, the Jews they had ownership of 6.1% of the territory of Israel. 6.1% only. That's 1948. And the Palestinians, they owned 43% of the territory. Another 40% belonged to the mandate, to the British authorities. So the Jews in 1948, when the war started between the Jews and the Palestinians, and then the Jews and other Arab states, at that point, the Jews controlled only 6% of the territory. The United Nations in 1947 gave the Jews 55% of the territory, even though the Jews owned only 6%. A big part of the 55% was the Negev desert. So it was useless land, could not be used for agriculture and so on. But still, they gave 55%. And that's why the Arabs rejected the United Nations resolution of November 1947. So both parties, the Israelis and the Palestinians, are lying. There's a lot of propaganda. The Jews say, we owned a lot of Israel. That's not true. They owned only 6%. The Palestinians say the Jews expelled us. It was ethnic cleansing in 1948. They call it Nakba.
No.
That is a lie. That is not true. The biggest scholar of the Nakba is an academic. His name is Benny Morris.
Benny Morris, no.
If you read his work, you realize that there was no Nakba in effect. It is true.
Само се отвора архивите, некои ги отвораат. Израелските архиви ги отвараа за Накба, Бен Морис.
Yes, Benny Morris studied the archives and so on and so forth. There has been no Nakba. What happened is there was panic. There was a lot of panic because in some cases, the Jewish soldiers committed atrocities. For example, they killed many civilians in Dir Yassin and many other things. And so the Palestinian population panicked. There was a big panic because they thought the Jews are coming and they will kill all of them. And so they escaped. But only in one area, in one very small area, the Haganah, which was the predecessor of the Israeli Defense Force, only in that area, the Haganah ethnically cleansed the Palestinians. It was a very small, limited area. It was called Plan D. The Plan D of the Haganah was ethnic cleansing of a very small percentage of the Palestinians, about 20% of the Palestinians. All the other Palestinians left because they panicked, and they also left because the Arab states told them to leave. The Arab states said, leave the area, we are coming in, we will conquer the area for you, we will defeat the Jews, then you can come back. And that is the truth about the Nakba. The Palestinians are lying about the Nakba. The Israelis are lying about the accomplishments of Zionism. They're all lying. It's all propaganda all the time. And it's very, very difficult to establish the historical truth because no one wants to listen. Not the Jews, not the Palestinians. No one wants to listen to the truth. Because the truth is unpleasant. To both sides is unpleasant.
А дали во ова едно државно решение кое го спомнавте пред малку, имаше надписи во медиумите дека е можно некој вид странска војска да дојде на територија на Газа, нели ги спомнавте односите Хамас, Турција, таа блиска релација, па се споменуваше турска војска, турска армија, Индонезија дека може да прати некој вид мировна мисија, да ја наречеме. Дали мислите дека Израел би го дозволил тоа? Зашто ако гледаме дека нели сите овие држави кои ги спомнавте, Јордан, арапските, не им дале држава на палестинците, дали тука Турција би играла некаква посериозна улога кога се во прашање палестинците во некаков договор Трамп, Нетањаху, Ердоган? Со цел да се...
At this stage, it's very limited. At this stage, we're talking only about international stabilization force. Israel accepted it already. And yes, as I mentioned before, Turkey is going to be a member. Egypt is going to be a member. Indonesia, many Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and so on. And Israel has accepted this. The only problem where Israelis are hallucinating, they're delusional, they are living in fantasy, is they think the stabilization force will disarm Hamas. They think the stabilization force will act against Hamas. This is a dream. This will never happen. What will happen is that the stabilization force will collaborate with Hamas to establish some kind of civilian government in the territory, and Hamas will rearm itself and will become a force.
А не би можело да се случи, професоре, нешто како со Хајату Тахриру Шам во Сирија, нели Ахмет Алшара се разоружија и политички дојде сега председател. Нешто таквов, по примерот, сигурно Турција играше голема улога во Сирија, кога е во прашање опозицијата на Сирија, на таков пример да се случи во Газа. Например, да се разоружи и политички да се вклучи Хамас како Ахмет Алшара во Сирија, на некој начин, зашто сега...
That's what I just said. I just said that Turkey will collaborate with Hamas, Egypt will collaborate with Hamas to establish...
Би можело да ги разоружаат, значи би можело на ист начин да се, иако и постои недоверба, меѓутоа сепак тоа би било може би единствено решение да...
And Hamas will establish the civilian government, and Hamas will have weapons again. It will be a military force. There's nothing Israel can do about this. So it's a dream of the Israelis that these Arab states and these Muslim states, they will disarm Hamas. They will bring in some alternative Palestinian governance. What is the alternative to Hamas? Palestinian Authority is a joke. There are no other alternatives. There are some crime families, and that's basically it. Israel never allowed, stupidly, Israel never allowed for the Palestinians to develop self-governance, to develop a bureaucracy, to develop... Israel never allowed this. So now they are faced with the only alternative, which is Hamas.
А дали би се сложил според вас Иран со сите овие договори, решенија, да не биде вклучен во ниту едно, зашто гледаме дека Иран не се споменува никаде. Последна вест беше нели бомбардирањето на Иран и тие нуклеарни централи, од тогаш го нема некако Иран во медиумите. Како Иран би се позиционирал по ова прашање според вас?
Iran is in even worse shape than Israel. Iran was the true loser of everything that has happened because it lost its proxies all over, it lost Hezbollah, and it was humiliated and did not respond to the humiliation. So it lost a lot of geopolitical power. It's no longer a trusted ally. Groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, they no longer trust Iran because Iran has proven to be weak. Additionally, Iran is in a very bad economic situation. There is a huge drought, no water. It's really in a bad, it's a catastrophe. The economy is collapsing. The currency is collapsing. There are internal stresses in the theocracy. So various religious leaders are in disagreement with the secularists that took over the government. Iran will be looking inward, Iran has to focus on its own internal problems now. The strategy of going out, of becoming a regional global power, of defending itself with a firewall of, such groups, this strategy has failed dramatically. And Iran must now focus on its own internal problems. And for the next 10 years, I don't see that Iran will become any major power unless it decides to block the Strait of Hormuz. That's the only card that Iran has left. If it blocks the Strait of Hormuz, then it can blackmail the West. It can blackmail the world, not only the West, it can blackmail even China. So it's the only card they have. Iran must decide whether it wants to play with this card and blackmail the world into participation in various geopolitical forums and processes, or if it wants to disengage from the world and focus on internal problems. Soon we will know. I think the guard, they want escalation, they want conflict, and I think they may act unilaterally in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm very afraid of that. While the politicians and the mullahs, the religious people, I think they want to focus on Iran's internal problems. So,
А кога сме кај Израел и внатрешните проблеми, дали мислите дека Нафтали Бенет ќе го наследи Бенјамин Нетањаху или што се одвојува внатре, што би се случувало на политички план во Израел во следните години, месеци?
I don't see any alternative to Netanyahu. No. I think we're gonna have to live with Netanyahu for...
Значи, ова ја зацврсти неговата позиција кога е во прашање. Зошто имаше многу афери, многу началници, поранешни функционери на служби го критикува, зборува дека го стави Израел на колапс, на граѓанска војна, меѓутоа сега...
Netanyahu has three advantages. He is close to Donald Trump, and he can deliver Donald Trump. He works well with Donald Trump, and he gets Donald Trump to do whatever he tells him to do, which is very helpful. The second advantage of Netanyahu is what he did to Iran. He removed the existential threat from Israel, what he did to Hezbollah. So a big group of people are appreciating him for that. And the third advantage is that Netanyahu destroyed the judicial system, he destroyed the courts, and he destroyed the free media in Israel. So Netanyahu is like Viktor Orban or like Erdogan in Turkey. He's a dictator. Essentially, he's a dictator now. He is in control of the police, of the intelligence services. He's in control of the media. He's in control of the courts. He's in control of the Knesset, the parliament. There's no force in civil society that can resist Netanyahu now. He's too powerful. So one way or another, I am afraid we are stuck with Netanyahu for the foreseeable future, which is horrible news for Israel and even more horrible for the region, in my view. Because Netanyahu is a hostage. He's a hostage. He cannot act. I don't think he's a free man. He's a hostage of his coalition. And his coalition is only escalating. And I don't think he is in the position to, for example, initiate a political process with the Palestinians. He's not in the position. Even if he understands that this is the way to go, he cannot do it. So we're stuck.
Дали смете? Исто така многу се зборува дека сме веќе во Трета светска војна заради оваа војна на Блискиот Исток, војната во Украина со Русија и сега со Кина, со Тајван. Сметате ли дека Кина може да направи нешто околу Тајван според вас или толку се можностите на Кина во прашањето Тајван? Така.
We're not in a third world war. We are in a Cold War. Exactly like in the Cold War, you had Vietnam, you had, so it's the same. We are back to the Cold War. Each superpower is trying to establish its sphere of influence in the near geography. So Russia is trying to become the most influential in Europe, China in Asia, and America in the Middle East and North America and South America. So there is a division of the world into spheres of influence. And there are two superpowers, China and America, that are competing exactly like the Cold War in the 60s. Also in the Cold War, you had many local wars, many regional wars. There's nothing new, including in the Middle East. You had Israel had several wars with its neighbors. Turkey had a war Everyone had wars, you know, so I don't think it's a third world war. It's a Cold War. Russia is a satellite of China. Russia is not a superpower. Russia is a client of China at this stage. It's no longer a superpower. And so
Мислите дека нешто ќе промени на украинско тло? Русија дека може или толку е руската моќ во Украина?
Just allow me to answer your first question.
Okay.
I don't think China will attack Taiwan. It doesn't need to. I think it will isolate Taiwan, besiege Taiwan, and force Taiwan to become a part of Russia in a political way. The same way they did with Hong Kong. Exactly what they did with Hong Kong. Regarding Ukraine, when Putin reaches the borders of Donbass, when he reaches the borders of Donetsk and all these areas, he will stop. At that point, he will stop. He wants the industrial base of Ukraine. Donbass is where all the industry is, and big part of the agriculture. So he wants this, the economic part. When he controls the economic part, he will stop. If Ukraine loses the industrial heartland for good, Ukraine will become a second-rate agricultural power. Just agriculture. And then it will be, sooner or later, under the control of Russia, similar to Belarus. Zelensky is here today, and he will be gone next year, for sure. And then it's easy for Russia to engineer some pro-Russian puppet to be in the government in Ukraine. Ukraine will be poor, bankrupt, destroyed, no energy, no nothing, no industry, only agriculture. And so it will become an extension of Russia. That is inevitable. The question is not about Ukraine. The question is, does Russia consider all of Europe to be Russia's backyard? Does it consider all of Europe to be legitimately under Russian influence? The same way South America is under American influence, and the same way big part of Asia is under China's influence. Russia can say all of Europe is a Russian sphere of interest. Anyone intervenes in Europe, they have a business with us. They can say that because they already supply, for example, all the energy needs of some countries such as Hungary and Germany. They already depleted the reserves of NATO. NATO is gung-ho, you know, we're going to defeat the Russians, this, that.
Oh.
If you look at the real picture, NATO is completely depleted. All the ammunition is gone. All the missiles are gone. It's a mess. NATO is in a mess.
Сета надеж на Турција ја полага НАТО, кога гледаме. Најмногу на Турција се надеват, Европа.
Turkey is a wild card. I'm a big believer in the future of Turkey, especially if it gets rid of Erdogan. Yeah, but Turkey will become a regional superpower, in my view, and very soon.
А како регионална супер сила што споменавте, можно е Турција нешто на Балканот, Грција, Кипар, Израел, гледаме некој позиционирање Источен Медитеран. Дали според вас можно е Турција и Израел евентуално на Балкан да се судрат по некоја линија и кои би биле тие линии или не сметате така?
No, Israel has no real interest in the Balkans. But Turkey is in the process of re-establishing the Ottoman Empire. Absolutely is in the process of this. And the only real competitor of Turkey is China. The real sudir, the real conflict will be between Turkey and China, not between Turkey and Israel. In the Balkans.
Civilizations.
I'm talking in the Balkans, yes?
So
if you go to a country like Serbia, the real presence is Chinese, not Russian. And if you go to other countries, so if Turkey will try to essentially re-establish the Ottoman Empire, sooner or later it will have to either collaborate with China or clash with China. And then Turkey will become the most important part of NATO, because NATO has lost the war in the West. NATO cannot recover from the Ukraine conflict. Russia established itself as a major power in the West, in that part. I mean, East Europe and Western Europe. There's no NATO there is irrelevant and disabled. However, with Turkey, NATO can become very powerful in Central Europe and in Southern Europe. I think the new orientation of NATO and the new orientation of European Union will be to the south of Europe and to the center of Europe, not the east of Europe. The east of Europe is lost. Belarus is gone, Ukraine is gone. The east is dead. Maybe even part of Poland, maybe even some part of Romania. We will see. Moldova. We'll see what will happen. But I think the east is lost. So now what is the focus? Central Europe and Southern Europe. That is very good news for Macedonia. This is excellent news for Macedonia. I'm a big believer in the future of Macedonia, the geopolitical future. Since Macedonia is a central axis, a central pivot. Strategically, Macedonia is even to some extent as important as Greece. So I believe that when this shift in emphasis will happen, the shift in focus, Macedonia will become very important.
А дали кога ја споменувате Македонија, сте изненадени на некој начин или сте очекувале, вие ги следите состојбите, гласањето на Македонија во ООН? Кога е во прашање Израел, знаете последните резолуции гласања, Македонија заедно со неколку земји застана на страната на Израел. Како и гледате на овие гласања?
I am not well acquainted with Macedonian politics and so on. So I don't talk about something I don't know.
Професоре, може уште многу сигурно да разговараме. Јас имав уште доста прашања, али мислам дека е доволно за гледачите за почеток. Ве бара да ве запознат. Имаше едно прашање, прашајте го професорот, зошто толку, како психолог, зошто толку многу израелски војници имаат извршено самоубиство? Имаше некои изјави дека голем број израелски војници имаат извршено самоубиство, па за крај, ако сакате само ова да дадете одговор. Зошто е причината, како психолог, како гледате на таа појава голем број израелски војници?
The war in Gaza is very traumatic in two ways. First of all, your life is in danger, which is very traumatic. And this is something that remains with you for many years. But I think even more importantly, you witness war crimes, you witness atrocities, you witness the killing of children and women and so on. And this is called moral injury. The clinical term is moral injury. And this is something that remains with you for life. Not because you did it, not because you participated, even as a witness. Even as a witness, this is something that destroys your mind gradually and slowly. Because you lose faith, you lose trust in the goodness, essential goodness of people. You lose trust in your own state, in your own government, in your own nation. You see other people who are supposedly your brothers killing children and women. This is a break in your worldview, a break in your ability to trust yourself, your environment, your people, and sometimes the only alternative is to kill yourself, commit suicide.
Хуманоста е многу важна. Вие со тоа започнавте дека пред се сте хуманист и се надевам дека што поголем број на евреи израелци ќе имаат и вашата хуманост и разбирање на светот. Професоре, многу ви благодарам уште еднаш за одвоеното време и можноста да поразговараме, па се надевам во следна прилика за некои подобри теми, попозитивни теми, повторно ќе разговараме.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Почитувани, тоа беше професорот Сем Вакнин. Ви благодарам, се гледаме во следно интервју. Поздрав и се најдобро.
Thank you. Bye-bye and have a nice day. Nice evening.